Hey folks, welcome to another episode of The Security Table. This is Chris Romeo, joined by Matt Coles and Izar Tarandosh. And the topic for today is the sound of silence. So we will literally just sit here silently for 15 to, no, we couldn't. There's no way we could be silent for 15 seconds or 30 seconds either. But we were joking about the sound of silence. And it was made aware to me that there is a remake of The Sound of Silence by Disturbed. So this is not a music podcast, but we figured we'd start there. And I have a feeling we're going to come back to The Sound of Silence. I think we can tie it in at the end to what we're going to talk about today. So question I'm posing for Matt and Izar, and I guess the rest of the universe as well, is how can you be a security person that engineers don't hate? How can you be a security person that engineers don't hate? So let's unpack the second half of that first. Like, do engineers hate security people?
I think that hate is a strong word, but it's useful.
I thought you were going to say, no, it should be more like dislike. It should be a soft, no, you're like, it's a tough word, but it's to the point.
We need a chart because there is most definitely a non-zero percentage of hate going on. It may be small of the grand scheme of things, but it's a word. It's an important word. It is not inconceivable. There's hate.
It's another one of those things that you go depends, and it depends on what kind of security person. Like, are we talking compliance? Because then even security people hate compliance people. But
True.
Not personally.
Well, and there's different levels of hate, right? There's oh, he's coming. Oh, I got to do something now. This person is evil. Why is he or she here? Get out of my office before I throw something at you.
Well, there's one before that. That is, turn out the lights, and maybe they won't think we're actually in here.
And there's one.
Everyone be quiet. Lights out.
There's one after that. That's the voodoo doll.
Right. So why though? Why do engineers? We shouldn't use the word hate. Like, let's say dislike. Let's just soften it a little bit so we get more tens of percentage points in the graph here. So, but why? What does security do in both of your experience that makes engineers want to run away and hide and find ways to not deal with us?
So personal story time. I once had a team that circulated an email saying, stop talking to Izar because every time that we give him more details, he finds more problems. Right? So it's not like there was hate in there. I mean, nobody went. Perhaps there was, and I wasn't aware. But the fact of the matter is that I think that there is one thing that we can agree, right? That Marvelorium and Diciterium apart, the one substance in the universe that's the rarest and most costly is developer time. And we security people are constantly asking for developer time. And that raises a lot of it's not expectations, but
it's a challenge.
We don't just ask for their time. We're not just asking for their time, though, is there? Right? I mean, security overall. I mean, we all do it to some extent.
Wait, I lost my audio.
We're asking them to do something different.
Yeah.
Right. We're asking them to expend resources, to reveal information, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But we're also, people love to say, "Oh, you're interrupting, you're affecting our velocity," right? So you're impacting their ability to meet their needs and their requirements, and that is a very traditional. Originally, I think a traditional view in the way that security operated, and now a more the word I'm looking for, it's not traditional. It's completely not in my head. stereotypical. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's a very stereotypical view of security. Oh, there are always roadblocks, right? We've gotten I think a not undeserved label of being roadblocks to progress. And I think we're getting better about that over time. And I say we collectively in the grand scheme of security professionals. But stereotypically, I think we're seen as, speed bumps, roadblocks, and otherwise nets on the process.
And we talked in a previous episode about guardrails and paved roads as a thing that limits that friction, because the paved roads are there to give the guidance and give the correct components, the IAM policies, the things that are hard for individual developers to have to try to figure out and come up with a secure configuration for when you give them that paved road. But when I think about the challenges that engineering has, for example, with security, if we go to the executive or leadership level, I think that this is part of the challenge. This is part of why they don't always embrace everything that we want to do. Because if, for example, I'm running an engineering team that has, let's just say 100 developers, let's just make a nice round number. And you're telling me that you want to introduce this thing called threat modeling. And I ask you, well, what is that going to, what's that? How much effort are my people going to have to put in? Well, if they each expend 8 hours a month, then we think we can really make a move on this whole threat modeling thing and get better at it as an organization. But then what I have to do as a leader, though, is I have to go, okay, I have 100 people times 8 hours. How many person months is that? How many person years is that? Like, that has a cost. That has a gigantic cost when you start talking about doing something across 100. Now imagine if you have 1,000 developers or 10,000 developers. Now it's 8 hours times 10,000 developers. That's people. You're basically asking me to take a classroom full of people and dedicate them to threat modeling for the whole year when I do the aggregate kind of analysis. So I think that's part of the challenge.
Here's the thing. Once upon a time, when I was perhaps not so young, but much more naive security professional, I would look at you and say, but I need that time because I'm going to give you A, B, C, D, E, and things are going to be better at the end of it. But now I can already look around and empathize with those people and see how they think and see what's behind the thought from their side, and understand that most times what I'm putting on the table is something that's very intangible against the very tangible thing that you just put of the 800 hours in there, right? So it's not even the fact that I'm coming and asking something that's very expensive to them. It's that what I'm putting against that, it's something that they can't value beforehand. It makes it very hard for them to achieve a positive decision.
And it's hard to see the return on investment.
Exactly.
When you're telling me, you can tell me, hey, for that 800 hours, you're going to have, on average, you're going to eliminate two security, let's just say bugs, that you'll have to expend time and effort on from a rework perspective. So we can do an equation, we can do some formulas, but myself as an engineering leader, if I take all my security experience and I throw it away and say I'm just going to pretend I'm an engineering leader and I just know engineering, it's a show me the money type of scenario. Like, you can't prove to me that I'm going to expend the 800 hours. That's a given. But you can't prove to me that I'm going to get 1,600 hours of relief by fixing two security bugs are going to get eliminated from each of those developers' world, which is actually going to double. You're going to invest 8 hours, but they're going to save 16 or 24 or 40 or whatever it's going to be.
Because again, you come in and you're selling insurance, right? And unlike established insurance, we don't have enough data to point out to actuarial tables and say, these are the chances that I'm going to make your world a better world if you do the things that I'm asking you. Mm.
It's actually interesting that you say that you use that analogy of selling insurance, right? Like, farmers or State Farm or whatever but think of who we're talking to. We're talking to home builders, contractors, and carpenters. And to use this analogy, right, we're talking about trades the people who do plumbing and electrical and whatnot. These are the engineers we're talking to. They don't get homeowners insurance for the homes they build. So why do we talk insurance?
They get liability insurance.
They get liability insurance.
They carry liability insurance, which is the connection to what Izar is saying. You're offering me as an engineering leader liability insurance, saying I'm going to get 16 hours. We're predicting this event's you're going to have some number of events, and I'm telling you I'm going to save you twice as much time.
But they also get data. They also get data sheets. They also get regulation. Permits and regulations from towns that they have to follow. Right.
Wait.
We're not talking about. Go ahead.
Just to strangle the analogy here.
Yeah, because it is pretty.
If I ask
hard,
somebody to build me a house, I get a subcontractor who's going to do the electrical. That person does their work. I move into the house catches fire. And the firefighters say, hey, it started because the electrical was not up to code and something just burned up. You want to tell me that that person that put the electrical in place doesn't have any liability? They do. So there is the issue that I can choose to go for insurance, or I can choose to sit on top of that person and make sure that everything that they are doing is up to code. So we are the guys who are.
That's why you have building inspectors, right? Like I've heard people use this house building analogy about software as well. And you have the building inspectors who are doing the checking. The security team effectively is doing the checks at the right points and the inspections to say this thing's been built to whatever the code was, the requirements that we've declared, where they're going to be.
So do people hate building inspectors?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm asking because I have no clue.
I think
stereotypically,
when you're a house builder, when you're a builder and you have just like in security though with home, and I'm not a home builder, by the way, but you have a range of inspectors. You have inspectors that will hold you to every letter of the law. Oh no, it says that you have to have 74 nails per foot. I counted 73 here. Fail. Like does that one nail not being at 74 somehow reduce the structural integrity of the house? No. That's just so the inspector can be a stickler that, and we as the consumer, we as the people who are going to move into the house, we want that inspector to be like, 73, you're going to give me 80 because you missed one. You're going to give me more. We want as the person who owns the house, we want it to be as safe as possible. But as the person who's building the house, you want a happy medium. You don't want the inspector who's giving you a list of 5,000 items that are wrong with the house, including there was an extra stone in the driveway that was sitting in the front yard, a pebble. You can't have pebbles off the driveway. Pebbles have to be within 2 feet of the driveway.
So what I think you're telling me, because in the middle I had to change my headphones and I missed half of that.
It was brilliant, by the way.
I'll hear it on the episode. I'll hear it on the episode.
It was epic.
But on the impression that I got from the tail end there is that I would hate that person less if what they brought to the table was, wait for it, reasonable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in the middle between extreme and weak. There is a reasonableness that sits in the middle, even in the home building process, where and a lot of inspectors are reasonable because they work with builders all the time and whatnot. So
pragmatism is that other word we should be
right there. So pragmatism born from empathy and perspective taking
and experience.
Right. Meaning
right. Because that home builder is going to know, well, 73 versus 74, the building code is designed for the 120, 130, 140% scenario. And so that's okay. They can make that reasonable call if there's nothing else wrong or that there's nothing else of significant value of interest, right? They can be pragmatic about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So why else? We talked about resource. I think we can bucket this whole conversation in resource management. is a reason why engineering or engineers dislike what they get from security. But there are plenty more buckets.
Oh, yeah.
Like I can think of not improper tuning or fidelity of tool results is a reason that developers, and that's not a resource thing, that's just annoying because your tool generated 500 Jira tickets for me. And now I have to go click through them and try to resolve all of them.
You know, at the fundamental root, I think this comes down to the eyes over their shoulder, the oversight, somebody else is paying, is somebody else. There's a measure of control, but there's also a measure of somebody else is telling me how to do my job.
Yeah. Yeah. And that connects to what Brooke always says, that nobody likes to be told that their baby is ugly. So sometimes we go threat modeling, but we end up criticizing a design when we shouldn't be.
Well, it needs to happen, just not a critical eye to the design needs to be placed, but we shouldn't be criticizing it because then it becomes personal for the developers.
Yeah, we're not critical. We always, and when I think of like something we could add to the threat modeling manifesto, not that we could add anything to something that was so perfect, but there could be an angle there about, respecting the person, respecting the engineer. I can't word it correctly, but basically respecting the engineer attacking the design so that the person knows, hey, I don't think you're a bad engineer. This is just what the process is we need to think about what could go wrong. I'm not saying this is even going to happen. No, I think you're an excellent engineer, but some people could take that it could be a rough receipt for them. Like you're telling me I'm a bad engineer, Izar.
No, but
you're telling me I suck at coding.
The corollary, the corollary of the discussion with Brooke on that was that when we come in, it's not that we are telling you that your baby is ugly. We have to make it clear from the beginning that we are here just to make sure that your baby survives. What it looks like is your problem, right? Which crib you're going to put it on, it's your thing. No, we're not even a pediatrician. We're the guardrails on the crib.
Nurse. The neonatal nurse or something.
Guardians of the Galaxy, Guardians of the Crib. You can choose.
No, the guardrails of the crib.
Guardrails of the crib.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice visual illustration.
And that sort of brings us back to what you said of the discussion that we had on guardrails and safeguards. I don't think that developers like those specifically because it reduces the friction. I think that it reduces the friction because by putting those in place, we sort of disappear in the background. We security professionals just disappear. We infuse the development practices with those guardrails and safeguards, and that lets us take a step back and just look at how they're being used rather than, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing? And now? Are you doing the right thing now? And now?
So
that's developer enablement, though. Like that's really the end game to what we do.
Yeah.
If we can integrate AppSec / security / whatever, does secure by design / threat modeling / whatever we want to call it. If we can integrate that into developer workflows, processes, and tools instead of being something different, like we talked about before in the previous episode as well, that's how you really eliminate the friction. Because then this is just how we build software.
Right.
We're not doing security things. We're just building software in a flow.
But is that the end game? Because I love how we build arches here without even knowing. Things that we talked about in previous episodes. At the end of the day, the end game is not putting those safeguards and guardrails in place and giving people tools that work and need less tuning or give less false positives. I think that at the end of the day, the end game is for developers to have their own security mindedness and realize that those are tools of their job, tools of their trade, right? So it's
similar to quality.
Exactly. So
I think that's a pie in the sky view. I think that's the.
It is aspirational, of course. Yeah,
I think we need to work towards it, though. We need.
But what I'm saying is developer enablement, putting those functions and features and things into the existing tools, like GitHub and GitLab, for example, are going through this take over the market where you can have SAST now from GitHub that's in GitHub. You can have SCA. You can have all these things. They've put those where they've integrated them into the development tools, so the developers don't even see something different.
Oh,
And so that what I'm saying is that's a gateway to what your inspiration is. You want developers to just care. Well, you can get there, but this one of the steps along the way is to help them see, is to take away the friction of other tools and other things that are outside of their normal flow.
so let's go there for a second. Yeah, GitHub is giving them that frictionless thing, but when they receive the notice from the tool saying there's something wrong here, is their reaction, yay, the tool found something wrong that I can go and fix? Or is it, oh God, one more thing that I have to stop now and go deal with because of this damn tool? That's the last step of the thing here. That's the aspirational part.
It's an 80-20 breakdown, by the way. I think 80% of the people are like, oh, again? There's 20% of people out there that are like, okay, I think there's 20% of the people that are with us. And maybe I'm being too excited or whatever in this, but I feel like there is a movement of people that get what we've been teaching for 15 years or 20 years here. And they understand, maybe it's because they've had a data breach or a gigantic vulnerability as a result of a mistake they made. And so now they've just got it. They're like, I felt the pain. I get it. I got to deal with these things. I don't know. I don't know where it lands.
Yes, but to go back to the question of today, do those people stop hating security professionals, or do they stop seeing them as extra work because now they see how those things are actually necessary?
So I want to throw out a question to you guys with respect to developer enablement. If we look at development enablement as a phase where security blends into the background, right? Where we create things or specify things or guide people to adopt tools and other things, training and whatnot, that helps them do their job and include security in it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not in this question, I'm not suggesting anywhere that it's bad to be on that path, but do you think that there's a place, the way I like to think about how I don't piss off developers that I talk to is to be a trusted partner. That's a very overused way of saying it, I think. I enjoy sitting with the engineering team and becoming a part of their group and working with them closely. Yes, it takes a lot more time. It doesn't scale very well, but it helps that we can talk about engineering problems together and introduce security into that without it being, oh, you have to do this because this policy says X, Y, and Z, and I'm here to enforce it. No, I'm an engineer and architect. I'm bringing the security view, the voice of the customer. We can debate as engineers, right? And you gain trust that way.
It's a scalability problem, though.
It is a scalability problem.
How do I do that with 10,000 developers?
Do you have to? Maybe do you have
a security person?
But
I don't
one
think
every 25, maybe. So now I basically need my 10,000 developers. I need 4 to 100, 40 to 1,000. 40 times, I need 400 secure. I need 400 Matt Coles, which I would take that. Don't get me wrong. I would have an organization of 400 Matt Coles.
We had this challenge 2 decades ago with how many quality engineers do you have per developer? How many developers do you have per quality engineer?
Yeah, and we never solved it.
Right, it was 40 to 1, 50 to 1, something like that.
Yeah, and the same thing's happening here. Like I think that's a noble goal. But I have yet to find anybody who can resource to it.
But
to
this
the
is not going
because
to solve
you can't
the problem
resource
as
with
well.
10 people.
This doesn't solve it. This just moves reduces the blast radius of the problem.
Doesn't it solve the how do we not look like jerks to developers?
Yes.
Okay, so we can solve it.
We've
It's
helped
a
in
way.
that thing.
It's
No,
a
no,
way
no, no,
too
no,
because
no.
they
simple.
No,
trust
sorry.
you.
You said, does it solve or does it not solve? I'd say it does not solve.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
And the reason
Why?
is very simple. Once upon a time, you were developing something, you would open a terminal, open VI, write code, compile, push. Nowadays, things have reached a level of specialization, both for the developer and for the security person, that creates a sense of otherness. That for each other, we are always going to be separate species, but with some common DNA. And that otherness, I think it just makes the whole dialogue not more complicated, but more heavy. We are pulling in different directions. Okay?
See, I don't see that. I see it in Matt. Now, I don't think Matt's model works from a scalability perspective, but I think it does work from a building trust, and security is no longer this faceless entity that's throwing work at us, because Matt's there with that team of 20 engineers, and he's like, hey, I understand this sucks that we just did this tool to spit this out. I'm going to roll up my sleeves now and let's see if we can get this going. Like, you're leading. You're not just saying, hey, good luck, folks. I'm going to go home. I know it's 3 p.m. I'm heading home for the weekend. Enjoy. You're there rolling up your sleeves. You're with them. And they're like, hey, Matt is part of this team. He's with us. He's leading from the front. He's helping us solve the problems that he has control over or can influence. And so I think I'm with Matt on this one. I think they do end up trusting you. They lose their dislike because you're with them. You're part of their team. You're embedded on the team.
But no, because the problems that we solve as security people are removed from the problems that they solve as development people. Their volume is much bigger. We appear once in a blue moon to deal with a finding or to deal with threat modeling or to deal with this thing or that thing.
That's not the model we're talking about here, though. In Matt's model, Matt is with the team.
Yeah, right? With the team.
He's embedded.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. He sits in there where their cubes are. He has a cube there. He hangs out with them all day long.
And most of the time, he has his thumbs and they go circling until something shows up.
No. So
unless you're telling me that you become a developer that just happens to be a security expert as well.
Well, I think you do some development in that world,
absolutely.
though.
You do. Believe me, I don't want my code going into production.
Oh, mine's not allowed. It's been banned by the whatever code institute of the world.
So what am I doing? I'm reducing the quality of the team. Because either I embed as a 100% security person, or I embed as a poor engineer that knows security. If I am a 100% security person, I'm sorry, even in my most self-aggrandizing dreams, there isn't 100% of the time security issues to be addressed. So I am basically idling there until something happens. It's like,
but I mean,
I'm going to bring a firefighter.
You're leading the threat models. No, there's no way you're idling. You're leading the threat model process.
Participating in architectural reviews.
Code reviews.
Yeah.
You're doing code reviews of PRs that are coming through.
Well, in fact, let me just throw out an example. Right, in a previous life, working with engineers, this was the way it worked, and it was a small company, made it a little bit easier, right? I sat in design reviews, in architecture reviews, when they were talking about how to implement something. I was present because with the engineering skills that I could bring to the table, in addition to the security knowledge, I could act as another pair of eyes, as a peer, and that built trust. So while I wasn't writing code, I was influencing the design so that we didn't have to do security later, right? We can influence the thing at the ground when they're defining it, or when they're implementing it, or when they're deploying it, or, hey, so-and-so customer just called and they have this complaint or issue. We can do the translation.
But Matt,
yeah, I know that doesn't scale.
No, it's not that it doesn't scale. That's exactly my point. You were able to do it back then, because I'm willing to bet the stack that was used for that specific application and the deployment model and all that good stuff was way more contained than what we have today.
So I think that there's still a ton of companies out there, small companies out there especially, that still happens.
Yes, and those companies, the good ones, do have security staff on board. Many of them still see it as a cost sink and say later on when we get bigger. But today, in the embedding model of the norm, not normal, of the 80% of companies out there, my point is that to bring a security person in that also has all the knowledge of the stack to be considered a peer by software engineers, you're looking for a four-lift
A unicorn.
four-lift unicorn.
People
No.
call them unicorn.
Unicorns,
The
yeah.
DevSecOps unicorn idea is you have someone who knows Dev, Sec, and Ops all together, and they're unicorns because you don't see them very often.
And basically
Or
what you-
everyone says they saw one, but no one ever can prove it.
And what you end up is with a rhino that somebody painted white.
Right.
Okay, and you know what? I'm gonna put my hand up and say I'm one of those. I mean, I can talk technicalities with engineers all day long, but I know that I am not at their level. At the same time, I don't expect them to be at the level of expertise that I bring in the security side, right?
That makes sense. Yes, I would agree with that, and I agree. I'm not an expert coder in many languages that they use, but I don't think you have to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you are looking at the principles. But the problem is that once you agree on the principles, on the design, and they go do their merry sprint dance, you will sit back and wait for something to pop up to happen. You will not be
there's
doing
always something else to work
24/7
on.
threat models and code
Engineering
reviews and this and that
teams-
and the other one.
Engineering teams turn over 5 to 10% of their staff a year. That's what people always tell me, that, because I've heard that argument made in different contexts, that like you're going to, for example, in the training space, you're going to train everybody and there's not going to be any more people to do it. Well, every year, 5 to 10% of people in your engineering team turn over. So there's always new people who are coming in cold. They don't have a perspective on educate or security. They haven't. So I don't think. I mean, this is a weird place for me because I'm literally arguing both sides of the argument. I actually don't think this works from a scalability perspective, but I do think it works from an expertise and a trust perspective. So I'm in a really weird spot. Like I should just be quiet.
So
I'm not
today
even
we're not
looking at
talking
the-
about whether it solves the security problem, right? We're talking about whether or not there's a trust issue, and with that, this approach works to solve that trust issue.
Look, at the end of the day, the trust. Okay, the trust, I agree with you completely, because all of a sudden you have, okay, let's put things aside for a second. The scaling, the three of us agree this doesn't scale. Great.
Right.
So let's look at a hypothetical small company, small team, but with the resources to have security staff at hand. So I agree with Matt. The trust issue gets solved because all of a sudden you have a security person at hand. So for the developer team to now say, whenever I have a security problem, I have a person that I can just turn 90 degrees and talk to them directly. And that definitely solves the trust problem. What I'm saying is that very quickly what you end up is that security person gets underutilized. And all of a sudden, as a solution to that, because people in this line of work don't like to be bored, or bad things happen when they get bored,
Right.
all of a sudden, these people find themselves writing code for the product, right? Because you can only write so much security engineering until stuff starts to work and you're happy.
Doesn't that spur you on as a security person, though, if you're in that role, to expand your knowledge? Because it certainly did for me. So I've been in that role before, where I was kind of at the center of building something, and I had brought my security knowledge and expertise, but I didn't truly understand the language and framework and everything. So I went and learned it, because I was like, I want to be more effective in what I'm doing. And so, yes, it took me a little bit of time. I didn't come in ready to solve problems, but over a period of 3 to 6 months, I got to the point where I understood that framework. I understood the language. It was Ruby on Rails. I'm like, I understand how it works. I understand what the challenges are. It made me a better security person because now I understood it from the inside out. So I wasn't ready on day one, but by day 180, you still didn't want my code going into production, but I had taken steps to better myself because I wanted to be more effective with my peers.
But I think that there's a reason why most AppSec people, and I make a point here to say just the AppSec, definitely not all parts of security, why they tend to be a bit more generalists than deep dive into issues, right? Because the technology out there moves really, really, really fast. Mm-hmm. And if we spend the time to go deep into something, we're going to miss the other 180 things that happen meanwhile. I just don't think that metamorphosis turns a security person into something that the developers automatically like more.
Not automatically.
I can imagine. I can imagine that security person in a sprint, everybody's talking about something, and they raise their hands and say, "We cannot ship because we didn't do the authentication authorization right." And everybody.
Hopefully, you told them at the beginning.
No, and everybody looks at
them. You're not telling them at the end.
And hopefully, you don't call it out as we can't ship. That would
no. Perhaps they were telling all the way through, and they were being told, MVP, we have to put things out, we have to prove that it works, blah, 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 bolt on. And then everybody looks and damn it, Carl. Really?
Well, so remember that word pragmatism, right? In this model, there are times when you have to be comfortable. It's in part a trust thing, and it goes both. It's sort of a trust in two aspects, right? There's getting developer trust and having them recognize you as a peer. Sometimes that means smoothing over the edges when it comes to the way that hard compliance things, right? Can you not ship because you don't have authentication? Well, maybe. Sorry. Maybe
that's how we sound for developers, by the
way. Great illustration. That's what we sound like. It's just a barking dog, always nipping at their heels.
So maybe hold on.
But I think that at the end of the day here, Matt makes an excellent point. This makes people trust you more. But at the end of the day, the question that we are battling with today, just because they trust you, do they like you more? Sorry, just because they trust you, don't they hate you?
They hate you less, certainly.
They hate you less. They like you more because you're humanizing your function. You're not a box off to the side who's sending things across, throwing it over the wall. We don't even know who's over there, but they're just telling us our stuff is terrible and we can't move forward.
So
it's Matt said our stuff was not great, but he's helping us figure out how to fix it, how to adjust it,
and realizing that MVP may mean good enough and not great.
So you think that somebody saying he's a pain in the ass, or somebody saying he's a pain in the ass, but he's right.
He's our
pain. Right.
That involves
because it isn't just an inward facing thing; it's an outward facing thing, right? You're there to defend and translate from other teams, right? So when the security team or the compliance team, GRC, whoever comes along and says, "Hey, you're not meeting this standard," it's like, well, but they're doing the best they can. Now you become the voice. When you're talking to developers, you're voice of the customer. When you're talking to others, you're voice of the developer. You can provide that layer. It's not great.
I think Matt and I have made our point here. We can declare victory.
Let's say that you managed to convince me. Fine. Okay, cool. But now we are talking just the technical aspects of the thing. Can we step back and talk a bit about the soft skills of security people?
All of this requires soft skills.
To do it right, but if you don't, it's still effective because you're talking technicalities. You're talking something that you can point at a line of code and say this is not a line of code that should be here. If you do that nicely, or if you're a pain in the ass about it.
I came to realize it's probably been 10 years, maybe not that long ago since I realized it, but I started talking, and I know you talk about this as well, this whole idea of developer empathy. As security people, if we don't have empathy for the developers, then we really are not very effective. And we're not reasonable, just to use another term that we've been throwing around. It's not reasonable to be unempathetic of our developer partners in this process. And when I think developer empathy, it means I should realize the pain that my tooling inflicts on people's job operations, what they have to do on a day-to-day basis. I should understand how that impacts them, how it impacts the team, the resourcing. But I should also, so empathy is one thing, soft skills is another thing, and soft skills is more of a thing about how are we influencing, how are we leading, how are we influencing without starting a fight, but instead collaborating and making an argument. But for me, it comes back to empathy is always at the core of that. Like if I don't have empathy for my development teams, I'm never really going to get very far because I'm going to be stuck in all the old traps that we've had for the last 25 years.
And there are ways to solve the scaling problem, by the way. There are things you can do. No, not perfectly. Not perfectly. Sorry, you can help with the scaling problem, right? Things like making it a rotation, right? So maybe you're not with them full time, or maybe with them full time for a period of time.
Yeah, but then you don't have the trust.
Rotations
don't have the trust.
No, but you gain trust over time with that team, and as you're rolling off of that team to the next one, you have spent time training the trainer, working with the champion, and getting the champion confident in their role, right? So you become a member of the team, a connected member of the team, a peer. You gain trust, you get invited to things, but you're there to help with the explicitly you're there to support them, support and enable them, really, right? Mm-hmm. So, and again, none of this is perfect. It doesn't solve the security problem. It solves
But that's a coaching. What you just described there is a coaching program, not a developer embedding, not embedding a security person on the team.
I think they can be done together.
Coaches drop in, parachute in, and then they go away. Not because they're not a dedicated
That's
resource.
Not what this is. That's not the type of program that I'm talking about. The
approach. We're almost out of time here, and I want to make sure we capture Izar's empathy thoughts because I know he's talked about this a lot. We can have another episode where we argue about how Matt's idea was not scalable, and there's no way that it possibly.
I'm not going to argue against that. I just say
it'll be a short episode. But Izar, what do you think on empathy? What do you talk about with people?
I think that I see the point of what Matt's saying, right? And I agree to an extent. But to go back to the empathy, I think that it was very interesting that you pulled the empathy thread to the side of us as security people looking at the tools and things that we give the developer and feeling their pain on what they're suffering in their hand. But another thing that we always joke about is that you measure security code reviews by WTF per second. And one thing that we miss is that sometimes those WTF, they have a reason. Developers live in a constrained world, that they're not free to do whatever it is that they want. And sometimes it may happen that the things that we ask them to do lie beyond the constraints that they have for a number of reasons. And an important part of our empathy is understanding how they live in that constrained world and how what we ask can be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
That's a good thing to remember as well. That is, I can say I haven't thought about empathy in that particular vein that you described, but I think it's a powerful thing that I should be thinking about. Am I asking them to do something that's beyond what they can do? So they can't make me happy, and they can't make the rest of the team happy by fixing whatever the issue was or whatever. Like they're stuck in a vortex almost.
And that leads to another thing, something that I learned from my wife, that we use that word empathy, but it's almost like risk. We use the word, but we mean something else. People who have empathy for each other run the risk. That's not a word. People who feel empathy for each other, they run the risk of falling into the trap of commiserating together. So they realize that there is a limit to what they can do, and they dwell in that, oh well, that's the suck. That's what we have to do, right? And I think that what we are actually talking about here is perspective taking. It's that get into their shoes and look at the world from that angle, rather than feeling bad because they are under constraints or something like that.
Do people really commiserate?
Oh, I commiserate all the time.
Empathy?
I commiserate all the time.
Yeah.
Especially with myself.
Is it really commiserating if you're with yourself, though?
Well, it
if you're
depends.
schizophrenic, maybe.
Yeah, it depends how many voices you have in your head.
That's true. That's true.
Or, peyote or LSD or whatever you...
Let's circle back around and let me ask the question one more time because I want and then we have to tie it to the sound of silence somehow because that's what I offered in the beginning. But the question we asked was how to be a security person. Or how do you be a security person that engineers don't hate? And so just to recap, we talked about a number of different things, but if we work our way backward, we talked about empathy and soft skills and influence and embedding developers within that environment. Resource management. We talked about the over-the-shoulder look at people. People don't want to be looked over the shoulder. They don't like that, I guess. But final answer here. 30 seconds or less for each of you. What would be your summary of how to be a security person that engineers don't take based on your own unique experience? Matt first.
I have nothing else to add. Really, it's about being part of their world. I don't think there's anything more than that.
Okay. So you did have more to add because that was more. So just FYI, that was a good summary, though, of being part of their world. That's a good summary. You said it differently than you did before, but it gives you another view of, oh, okay, I'm part of their world. I'm part of their existence and how they're doing their job. Izar, what about you? What's your takeaway?
As we speak, one of the voices in my head is going back and reminding me that I was there when I saw Matt do what he described, when I saw him embedding with a team, and I saw the results. And I saw how much respect he got from that team. So I'll have to go back and say, yes, Matt is right. That is extremely important. But then when we extrapolate to the problem of it doesn't scale, then I think that if we take into consideration everything that we talked about here, empathy, perspective taking, and all that good stuff, and embedding, add all that together, and I think that the one-liner that I come up with is get closer to them. Don't remove yourself from the picture. Insert yourself into the picture that they are painting. Understand that it's not your picture. You're just background. You're just there to make the picture look better. Well, in some cases. But
and I think, that is the thing I take away from this as well. All of the things you said, and the different areas that we talked about, but it is a scalability problem, and maybe there is things that we can do. Maybe there are things we can do to try to embed security with less than a 25-to-1 ratio of devs to security people. Because, we're all going to agree, we've never seen a security organization that was allowed to grow and build a embedding program that was at those levels with, 10,000 engineers and 400 security people that were just doing embedded efforts inside of the team, and we don't see that. I don't see that being a reality. We sort of meet halfway.
We go about halfway with security champions, right? Because they're developers who gain security experience, not the other way around.
That's a good. We're gonna press pause on that, and we're gonna carry that forward to a future conversation. Of the difference between embedding a security person versus a security champion, and what are the things you get from each of those.
Oh, we're going to talk about security champions. Yay!
Yeah. But that's a Pandora's box, though, of opening that, because I almost want to start making my argument. I'm not going to. I'm going to say thank you for joining us here on the Security Table, talking about how to be a security person that engineers don't dislike. Hopefully that describes you. If it doesn't, hopefully you can apply some of these things we talked about so that people will like you just 1% more per day. Thanks, everybody.